Hello, my name is Scott Hicks. I'm Director of the Teaching and Learning Center at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Jennifer A. Whittington, Assistant Professor of Teacher Education and Program Coordinator of Undergraduate Elementary Education in the School of Education at UNC Pembroke, for today's celebration of teaching and learning. Dr. Whittington, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Who's the best teacher you've ever had and why?
So the best teacher I ever had, this dates back to many, many years ago when I was actually in second grade. And I think about this lady often, and my mom liked her so much that I had her in second and third grade when she taught a combination class during my third grade year. Her name was Linda Samuel. Miss Samuel was amazing. I think about now, one of the best memories I have with her was we liked to stay after school with her. So my best friend and I would stay after school in her classroom. And one day she had a teacher meeting, and she allowed us to put the morning work on the board for the next day. Uh, Little did I know, I wrote phonics on the board, and it was spelled incorrectly at second grade. Who knows that phonics is spelled incorrectly, right? And so the next morning when we went to school, I was thrilled when the morning work that we had put up on the board was there and that my friends had to do the morning work that I came up with. Um, so that's meaningful to me because Miss Samuel just really respected us as individuals, and she engaged us in the classroom, and she was tough, but she had really good relationships with all of her students. We had lots of respect for her, and still do to this day. She is one of my friends on social media. She is really she lives in my community, so she and I stay in contact. Most recently, my mom passed away a couple years ago, and I looked up, and there she was. You know, she's just kind of been with me throughout my educational career. Has always been around to ask questions and even to say, "Hey, I love you. I knew a long time ago that you were going to be a teacher." But I would say if there was a driving force behind my decision to become a teacher, Miss Samuel had a lot to do with it, and I spent a lot of time with her. And even to this day, she and I still chat about, challenges and also rewards and how we impact students as teachers.
She's an amazing individual.
She is really amazing.
What does it take to be a good professor in higher education in 2021?
Understanding the needs of our students and building relationships. One of the things that I taught in the public schools for 10 years, and I worked really hard to build relationships with the students and their families because I recognize that they're all different and that I can't meet their needs if I don't understand where they are and meet them where they are. And with building relationships with my students, I also needed to build relationships with their families so that we could work together to support those children. And it's not much different in higher ed. One of the first things we do, and fortunately we're able to do this because our class sizes are not really large or as large as they could be in other places. But I look at them and build relationships with their students and try to really understand where they're coming from and what they bring to the classroom because they bring a wealth of information, and being open-minded and knowing that I don't always know the right answer and that I learn from them so often, but I've got to be willing and flexible to allow them to engage and participate and share their ideas and work together so that they're able, they're empowered and they're in control of their learning. I think in higher ed, that's just as meaningful as it is in the PK schools. These students bring a lot of information to the classroom, and we're selling ourselves short and selling them short if we don't give them the opportunity to share their interests and their ideas.
So tell us something creative you've done in the classroom to engage your students.
So, I teach methods courses, and I try really hard to keep them engaged simply because they're 3-hour blocks, and sitting with me for 3 hours is really difficult. So lots of times we flip that classroom around, and my students are teaching, and I'm sitting back and watching them and grading, and we're doing some observations and things like that. But in my science class this semester, one of the things that we've really focused on again is doing some experiments. But we really enjoy there's a idea called the circus. It's called a science circus. And so with this circus idea, these students it can be thematic or just, kind of ideas, but they set up like centers. So if you are familiar with K6, those students do centers or rotations often. So in my science 4120 class, these guys do rotations, but it's called a science circus. And so they plan the circus. Again, we did one this year, and it was just all based on things from outside and things that we have at our fingertips that we don't realize, so we don't have to go buy things, doing more with less. And they create experiment and observations and little science activities that they can teach. So they teach a lot of different standards, or work around a lot of different standards and objectives, but it's done through a rotation. And so that's been a lot of fun. And I'm hoping next semester to incorporate more of that. Again, the other thing is understanding that they're going to get dirty. So we do a lot of hands-on activities. Last week we did the magic milk activity. Some of you may already be familiar with that, but my students, we had milk and food coloring and pie pans, and they were so excited to see what happens when with that chemical reaction with the Dawn dish detergent and the milk and the food coloring. So again, just keeping them involved, keeping them engaged, and helping them to really understand what it looks like to teach science in the classroom, and also that they can teach all subject areas through science. So often we think of science as living on a planet by itself, and it gets pushed by the wayside. But I sometimes tell them, if you can justify what you're doing and you're teaching your standards through science, then your administrator's most likely going to agree with what's going on in your classroom. And for me, I think that's probably the most creative thing we do, is getting them to understand that science can be taught and it doesn't have to be taught in isolation.
That's a powerful point. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you again for having me.